we feel like we sort of know each other and have been together for a while. We are entering in our second year of being together. And the purpose of our group is really just to support teachers and be a thought group, a safe place for talking about dyslexia and other literacy initiatives. So I'm Shauna Hudson, and I'm glad you are here tonight. And I will turn it over to Jen, who will introduce herself.
Sure. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you guys again. We feel like it's been a little while since we've been together. Again, my name is Jennifer Lamb, and I am a literacy consultant at the AEA serving Southeast Iowa. My background is special education and a love for literacy and helping all kids.
And I am Bambi Boggs, and I am the dyslexia specialist for Ottumwa Schools, and I am also a member of the cohort from Amy and Kara.
Hi, everyone. I think it's me, right? I hope so. I think so. I'm Kara Veach, and I'm part of the Southeast Iowa pre-service teacher group. And I am a literacy consultant for Great Prairie AEA. I also just finished the cohort 1 out of the University of Iowa with Bambi and Amy, and we are now dyslexia specialists. So we feel like we're ready to get out and get messages across the state of Iowa. And even, in our group, we've had people come from out of state and visit and things like that too. So that is fantastic. One of the things that actually Jen and I met a long time ago, I guess 5 years ago. And one of the things that we had the opportunity to do is we got interested in tonight's topic, structured word inquiry. We got interested in that. And we actually had the opportunity to travel to California to train with the big Peter Bowers, who's the guru. And we had some of our questions answered through that. And then it really kind of led us to more questions. And then it led me over the course of the last 4 or 5 years to do some of this work, mostly within the Mount Pleasant school district, which is what Jen was from Mount Pleasant, or she is from Mount Pleasant, but worked as an instructional coach when we first met. So have a little bit of experience that I'm happy to share with you guys tonight. I'm super excited to do that. So you know what? We just need to get started because this is going to be a jam-packed hour and lots of things to share. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Know that although we try to be as professional as possible, little technical difficulties could happen from time to time, and we'll just kind of work through it. So here we go. I can only see one at a time because I hid the rest of mine. So Bambi, I can see you right now. Bambi, am I sharing my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Perfect. Thanks, Bambi. All right. So this is structured word inquiry. I am Kara Veach, as I said before, and I just want to put this out there. I do this with a lot of the things that, I do a lot of studying and I do a lot of resource organization and things for people, but I always want to just say, I'm not an expert on SWI. I've had some training, I've had some practice and the opportunity to go into classrooms to work with teachers who do the work, but just know I don't consider myself an expert. I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years here and there, not every day, of course, but there's just so much to learn. There's so much to learn with SWI. And we're just going to kind of scratch the surface and give you a very broad overview. And hopefully at some point we'll be able to do a part 2 for SWI. All right, so just know I'm still learning and we're going to learn together tonight. Let's get going. So drop it in the chat. We just kind of want to know what school districts or universities are represented tonight. And we do have people monitoring the chat. If you could, it would be really great if you stayed muted. They'll try to interrupt or they'll try to jump in and say, hey, there's a question. Maybe you could address it really quickly. We won't get everything answered tonight. There's just no way, not with an hour's time, but there are people answering or we'll be looking at the chat as we go tonight. And while you do that, I was in a school a couple of weeks ago and they had this fabulous board up in their teacher's lounge and it was student quotes. And there's just a couple I have to share with you because it made my entire week. And I was able to go back a couple of days later and talk to some of the teachers to get the behind the scenes stories of some of these. And they are hilarious. Like, for example, you can't read this one, but it says, wow, you're growing a mustache. One of the students says to the teacher, and she's a female teacher. She was not super happy about that. One of a little kindergartner asked his teacher, is that a wig? just things that make your day, right? And the one that cracks me up, one of the most, because the teacher was standing off to the side and she was thinking to herself, oh no, I'm going to have to intervene in this. And one student says to another, it happened to be in first grade, I know what MILF means. And she's like, oh no, she gets ready to go in and interject herself into the conversation. He says, man, I love frogs. If that doesn't make you smile, I don't know what will. And with that, let's get going. All right, so this quote comes from, oh, I'm gonna have to close my chat because I can't read it all. I'm trying to look at it at the same time. Many people believe that, and it comes from Denise Ide in Uncovering the Logic of English. Have no fear, teacher friends, because I have a resource page for you that I've built that's going to have all these resources linked that you're going to get. So don't worry that you're going to miss something. You're going to get all these resources later too. So Denise Ide writes in her book, many people believe that English is no longer follows patterns. The logic of English has been lost in the last 80 years to educators and the general public. The keepers of this knowledge remain a few reading centers, literacy specialists, dyslexia institutes, and researchers. And what do we need to do? We need to get it into the hands of teachers who do the work every day and are working with our students. So that's why you're here tonight. Let's get going. All right, so our work tonight, and by all means, people, if I'm talking too quickly, you're just gonna have to put it in the chat and I'll do my best to slow down. It's just, we have lots to cover and I don't want to run out of time. So we have our agenda. It's basically mind shifts, vocabulary and routines, tools and resources. And you can kind of see beside that, we have some general kind of goals here. And the first one is we really want to talk about these mind shifts and challenge the preconceived notions about the English language. You really talk to any teacher or many teachers and they will tell you, you know what, we just have to memorize it because our English language is just crazy. It's not actually true. And I hope that I'm going to do at least make a dent in that tonight to show you that we actually follow a very well organized language. The next one is just, we're going to go over some vocabulary that you'll need for doing SWI in your classroom, and then talk about doing putting routines in place that might be teacher-led or student-led word investigations. And the last one, or the last couple of our goals, will have some tools and resources that will aid you on your journey. And the very last one is you hopefully can pick up some juicy tidbits that you can impress your fellow word nerds, either at school or at home. All right, so let's do a little tool preview here. We have these tools are provided for free by several different people, and you're going to have the links to all these, so don't worry. One of them is a word searcher, and you can kind of see a screenshot here, and what it is it's used for students and teachers. You can put different word parts in, and it gives you a whole bunch of words to go with it, and you'll see why that's important in a minute or in a little bit. Word sums are one thing we're going to talk about as well. And then we're going to talk about the word matrix, which is actually called the mini matrix maker. And really what that does is on top right here is what it looks like. And on the bottom is what it produces. And we're going to talk more about how to do this. All right, so what is SWI, structured word inquiry? Well, it's based in inquiry, and it provides a routine and resources for students to investigate words based on morphology, etymology, and phonology. Now, take a look at what these mean. First of all, we always hear these terms, and sometimes it's good just to kind of define them at first. Morphology, of course, is the study of internal structures of words. And etymology is the study of origins of words and how they change through time. I love etymology. I love the history part of this and how our words, as languages joined each other and as wars spread across, the Middle Eastern countries and into Europe and finally into what's now known as the United States of America, how that changed not only names of countries, but it also changed our language. And that's just so fascinating. You can often hook kids that might be kind of reluctant to do their spelling or something like that. You can hook them with this piece of it by telling those stories of war and carnage and all those things that go along really with our language and our language structures. And then the last one, of course, is this is when we hear a lot. If you're an ELA teacher, you're talking about phonemes and phonology and how speech is organized into sounds in our words. It's kind of interesting now. You know, I'm a dyslexia specialist because I just told you that, right? The word inquiry kind of scares me a little bit because as a dyslexia specialist and someone who works with dyslexics, I like and I highly value a solid scope and sequence to things when I teach. And the fact that we have the word inquiry, which means, you know, that seems much looser and willy-nilly to me, and that makes me a little bit nervous. But what we know is, Kelly Sandman Hurley, who is one of the dyslexia gurus and has been for quite a long time, in her book right here, called Dyslexia and Spelling, Making Sense of It All. She is a huge fan of SWI. And the reason being is because instead of just memorizing how words are spelled, we're giving kids the opportunity to make meaning. And that builds an understanding, and that helps bypass this cognitive load that we call that is working memory. So she really is a huge advocate of this structured word query process and instructional routines. And she says more about that in her book too. This is definitely a book you're going to want to pick up. She does share a lot about dyslexia in it, but she also talks about structured word inquiry and also just how we look at words and just lots of great things that we need to be teaching kids. So my little plug for her. So why use SWI? Well, students' understanding of morphology was a better predictor of reading comprehension than their vocabulary level. And the conclusion that students with a greater understanding of morphology are more successful at learning academic vocabulary and comprehending text is a strong argument for including morphology instruction in language and literacy programs, especially in urban areas. And I just want you to notice, the way we teach kids is that we teach to spell by sound, like you sound it out, right? But really our language or our orthography is actually built to first recognize morphology. And morphology and morphemes are those little tiny pieces of words that carry meaning. And that's actually how our language is built first and foremost, followed by etymology. And remember, that's the history and the word of where the word origins are, where they come from. And then lastly, interestingly enough, by sound or phonology. So we kind of have it backwards and since we have it backwards in how we teach kids to spell words, it leads to what we consider lots and lots of rule breakers, when in fact, they aren't rule breakers at all. They're following morphological principles. It's interesting. And don't worry, I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but I have to really share that to get kind of an understanding of where we're going. All right. How are we doing chat wise? I have everything turned off. Is there anything I need to address immediately? I don't see anybody's faces anymore, which I hate.
Nope, you're good, Kara.
Thanks,
You're doing
Jen.
great. Keep rolling.
Okay, let's do it. So here's some mind shifts, and these are some biggies. So morphology is actually the foundation and framework of the English language. And the book that you are possibly getting tonight, called Beneath the Surface of Words, is by Sue Hageland. And this is where it comes right out of her book. And that's just us thinking about morphology. Is actually one of the first things we need to think about, even before sounding out words, which mind blown. Don't worry, we'll talk. So morphology, etymology, and phonology should all be considered when working with words. And the English language is actually very organized and logical. And here's a big one, and this is a hard one, because as a teacher, you want to stand up in front of your kids and you want to have all the answers. But here's the dealio. That's not possible. When I'm working in a classroom, I probably say, oh, I don't know, that's interesting. We'll have to investigate it more times than I have an answer. I'd like to say I'm a brilliant word nerd that knows all these and stores all this knowledge right in her head. That is not true. So I have to go and research things too. You're going to have to be okay with that. You're going to have to be okay with telling kids, you know what, guys, I don't know the answer to that. Let's investigate that. Okay. There shouldn't be any shame in your game on that. They should know it up front that we all are just learning, and we learn new things every day. And that's a huge mind shift, particularly, maybe for middle school and high school teachers, right? but it's just something you have to kind of agree upon and know that you're not going to know the answer to everything. Let's talk about some word examples. And this comes out of that book, Beneath the Surface of Words, by Sue Hageland. And so what she mentions in some of her text is right here. She mentioned, she's working with a kiddo and they are spelling, she said, spell added, right? Well, that kiddo, if they're going to spell it phonetically, it's going to be spelled ADID, right? Add-id. Phonetically, this kiddo is correct. But that kiddo didn't consider, and why would he if no one has taught him this, is that really added, of course, is spelled ADD. Add has two D's in it because it's short for addition. This is that word origin place. It's short for that, plus the suffix ed. Okay. She talks about the word sign. So sign, SIN would be considered a rule breaker because why is the N there in the first place? So a kiddo might spell it SINE, sign, right? Has all the sounds there, phonetically correct. But really what we need to consider is its morphological origins, that a base, this base SIN is actually an abbreviation of signature. Did you hear it? Signature. And how a kiddo could discover this would be by using those word sums, that tool we talked about a little bit earlier, we're going to talk a lot more about, and a matrix. Something else to be just important to point out for SWI, they use these brackets, and Jen was laughing because she wanted to see me do this. So these angle brackets indicate to spell what is inside and not read them. So always like when Jen and I were teaching a class, we were always like walking around like this. Those angle brackets are, you don't say sign, you say SIGN. And the reason being, because sometimes bases change pronunciations based on their morphological structures or their etymology or something like that. So we want to get kids used to just spelling it out versus pronouncing it, because likely the pronunciation might change. So you'll start to see these angle brackets all over in my presentation. All right, so I have some videos. I have to tell you, I was pretty nervous about running videos. So we'll just see. It might be an epic fail and none of my technology works. And in that case, I'll link them on the resource page and you can watch them later. This first one is some older kids talking about orthography and talking about the SWI process that is in their classroom. And we're not going to watch the whole thing. So, oh, well, let me go back.
I liked when we learned about like the meaning of different bases, because then I kept noticing it in different words, and then I kind of knew what the word meant if I didn't know what it meant. The fun part about orthography is that you get to take the word apart and you get to figure out the bases and find the meaning out of them instead of just spelling the word without knowing what it actually means. When you take the word apart, you can find that it's like related to some other words that you want to talk. In orthography, we learned meanings kind of behind the main meaning of the words that helped us understand what it really, really meant and use them better. It also helped break bad spelling habits. I liked learning the history behind the word that we were studying. A word's meaning in the past is completely different from the meaning in the present now. Such like awesome and gymnasium.
Sorry, I'll go back to it. When I shut it off, it's a click thing. Okay, so I like the history. I share that interest with the girl that was on there. So that's what older kids, are having to say about this. What's interesting is that this work can even be done with our smallest learners, even pre-K and kindergarten. And I want to tell you, we're going to watch a video about how morphology is mostly usually reserved for older students, but it's actually, since it's the foundation of English, we need to start them younger. So this is a teacher, and she's a pre-K teacher at the Nevaeh school, which Jen and I were able to go to in California. Of course, the kids weren't in session because it was in June, and train with Peter and his team, including Rebecca Lovelace, whose website is on this RAIN investigation. What you're going to notice is she refers to something called word families. And what we know about word families are usually with decoding, we're talking about word families like bat and rat and at, the rhyming word families. And SWI, word families are more of a morphological base. So Word families like would be rain, rain plus S, which would be rains, rain plus ED, which is rained. So just notice that, and notice her definition of word families is definitely different than what we consider, or what most of our conversations outside of SWI consider to be word families. So we'll see if it works. And again, this is Rebecca Lovelace's website. You are going to have this link on your resource page. She has tons of resources in here, ideas for just starting out, little activities, blogs, and things like that. So it's a good place to check this out. So this is a teacher at the Nevaeh School, and these are pre-K students in a structured word lesson about rain.
We're going to start the day off today with a word family, and it's something that's been happening after a long time of drought. And Anaya, what does this say? Rain. It's the family, the word family of rain. What's rain?
Rain is water that drops from the sky.
Okay, everybody do a little rain sound. Okay, big storm. Oh, stop him, just a drizzle. We're going to be looking for words in the family that are related to this idea, that have this meaning. Raise your hand if you can just think of a word in your brain that's in the rain family. Okay? So why don't we start with Jack?
Rainer.
Rainer. What is a rainer? Thing that catches water. That's very creative. That's a creative kind of. Okay. I don't know if that's a word yet, but it sure sounds like it could be one. Okay. What else? So it has the base, and then we added that suffix. Okay, what's another word in the family of word family of rain? Baron. Raining. Okay, put out your base. Raining. Okay. What's raining? What is raining? Let's ask Ellery.
When rain comes down, like today, it was raining.
Today was raining earlier this morning. Okay, I'm gonna do this. Here's how it looks. R, A, I, N, and then it has I-N-G at the end, raining. Okay, when the rain's coming down, it's raining. All right.
Okay, so I would love to go on and show that whole video, but it's kind of long and it's linked for you. You can go ahead and watch the rest of it. But did you guys catch her doing base and our affixes? Like she was saying suffix, and she hadn't got to prefix yet, but she was saying that with our littlest kiddos, thinking about, they're already talking about meaning of words. They're talking about structure of words. Did that pre-K kiddo actually read the word rain? I suspect they've done a lot of work with the word rain, and probably she had already had it memorized. I don't know that for sure because I wasn't a part of the lesson, but all the different aspects that she's bringing into that lesson and already talking to them about bases and prefixes and suffixes and pointing that out to them. They can handle that kind of language. It's like we're keeping things secret from them, and we shouldn't be keeping things secret. We need to be talking about it. You're not asking them to go back and independently write those things on their own, right? You're having conversations about it, and you're bringing meaning and morphological structure into it. Super powerful for kids. All right. Okay, so we're going to go on to SWI vocabulary and routines. We're going to dive into some teacher-led and student-led word investigations. All right, so first off, if you don't know the resource Can Do Kids Academy, I didn't know anything about it until a couple weeks ago when Bambi and Amy shared it with me. Holy cow, there are pre-made posters for free, and all you have to do, you have to put them in your basket and act like you're buying them, but there's no charge to it, and then he sends it to your email to download. There's so many great resources for free. Did I say that? Because for free, you don't ever really get that chance to say that very often. So this is kind of what a word sum looks like. So orthography, of course, is made up of bases, and there's a connecting a vowel letter in there, and then there's a suffix that ends up Notice right here, rewritten as orthography. So we have, and notice I have my angle brackets, which by the way, I plugged those in. They're kind of off. I know they're not really, if Jen had control of this slide deck, they would be perfect. And maybe she'll fix it for me later. So I have a base. So remember I have my angle brackets. I'm going to say O-R-T-H. It's Greek. It means correct. I have a connecting vowel. Connecting vowels are huge, especially in the Greek language. And we're going to talk a little bit more about those later. Then I have another base, G-R-A-P-H, and it's Greek to write. And then I have my suffix Y. And it's rewritten as, notice the plus marks, rewritten as orthography, which is the whole word. This is a very basic word sum. Okay, we're going to talk more about this. This is kind of, you need kids to be able to pull apart words and put them back together. That's a super important part to get them to notice the parts in words. And then again, this is just Peter Bowers talking about English orthography is complex, but highly ordered. And it's considered morphology, etymology, and phonology. Those three elements interrelate to determine the spelling of words and the meaning of words, actually. Okay, so here's some more SWI vocabulary to understand. You guys, I don't even have it all sorted out in my head. I look things up all the time. When I'm reading something and they're saying element versus base versus bound base and free base, I have to look those things up a lot. So don't feel badly about that. Just know I'm going to try to help you organize that. So remember, we're starting morphology, right? And morphology is all about morphemes, those little things that carry meaning, right? So when it's written, they change the wordage, becomes that morpheme becomes an element. And you can see down here, like with prefixes and suffixes are actually elements that are fixed. Sorry, I have to put my there. And then so a prefix would be an element that's fixed before a base or a stem. Same thing with a suffix, except it's after a base or a stem. So what's a base? Well, a base is a morphological element that carries the main meaning of the word. So like run is a base. Ask is the base, and think is the base with a prefix before the element or before the base, and actually a suffix after the base. Okay, so then we have bound bases and free bases. My friends, these aren't going to be a huge part of our conversation. You're going to have a PDF of this if you want to dig a little bit deeper into it. We just don't have enough time for this. A bound base can't stand by itself. A free base can stand alone. That's about all we're going to say. And then we have these connecting vowels that really come into play when we are digging into the different layers of our language. This little mark right here just means it indicates something was before it, but the O is Greek. A lot of times you're going to see an O connect two elements in a word. If you see an I, like in facial, that's Latin, the connecting two elements in a word. That U is also used commonly in the Latin language, and it's connecting two elements in a word. You might see several of these in a word, and it just makes it smoother to say. It's basically what it boils down to. So this is just a little bit about SWI vocabulary. There's a lot more, and pick up books like beyond the surface of words. Pick up these. She has a great glossary and all these kind of words that you can look up if you're not sure about that. What is exactly a free base? Free base? Oh, it's happening, my friends, and it's only 7:32. My mouth's getting all gibber. So we'll see. Maybe I should just take a drink of water here. All right. So looking at historical relationships. Our language, and like I said, this is how you could possibly hook kids into doing this work. Get them involved, because how does language spread? Through war and immigration and all those. As people move, language moves, and culture builds there and here. And you can start all the way back with our Anglo-Saxon people, these people that they lived in a very violent, tumultuous world, but they needed language, right? They have those really simple, they're the layer of language that's very simple. They're just like words that are usually one syllable. They might be compound. A lot of our high frequency words come from the Anglo-Saxon, things like mother, said, and bird. And the reason why they're simple like that, because they were looking around and they needed to name that thing that was flying in the sky. So it was a simple word, usually one syllable, that they used. So then we moved into Latin. And as that, words spread and things, languages continue to spread and mix and intermingle and all those things. Like Latin is a little bit more complex, right? They would have even considered themselves more of a complex people, right? These are usually multisyllabic, and they usually need a root and at least one affix. Okay, like they're usually stressed syllable. Now, if anything stresses me out with word study, it's stressed syllables because I cannot hear them. I have to really stop and think of what's a stressed syllable. So maybe you're with me on that. I don't know, but that's stressed syllables stress me out. And then we have the Greek language. That's even more complex, but they gave us, CH says k and PH says f, and those kind of things. And many of those relate to science, whereas many of the Latin roots and things, they relate to like social studies and physical science and literature. So let's do a little drop it in the chat here because you've been sitting for a little bit. I have two words for you. Which word has an Anglo-Saxon word origin? Sun or photography? Drop it in the chat. Well, I see the numbers going up, so I'm just going to guess. Hopefully you said sun. Why? Because they needed to name that big glowing thing in the sky, and it's a simple one-syllable word. They called it a sun. Photography, that's Greek. The PH is give it away right away, as well as the O connecting vowel. That's a Greek word with a word origin in Greek. Thanks for playing. Here's another one. Great. So I love the did you knows because I like random knowledge about words, and I think that I impress people, but really I probably don't. People just roll their eyes and walk away, especially if you're not a teacher because you don't get it, right? Particularly my husband. If I'm like, did you know this? And he's like, I don't care. Turns around and walks away. He's gotten pretty good at it. But within my circles of people, some care. Okay. So here it is. Drop it in the chat. Blank is the most common sound in English. And while you're doing that, here's some more random facts for you. Let me close out I guess I should call them interesting tidbits rather than random facts. So I didn't know this, but Latin prefixes often have more spellings because it's how it sounds in your mouth. Like they're trying to, like, for example, the word is illegal. I can say that easily, but then try to say illegal. It doesn't roll off your tongue well, right? So instead of using INLEGAL, we switch to ILLEGAL, same meaning, but it's much easier for you to say. Impossible started as impossible, which is just harder to say. Still the same meaning, but we switched into IMPOSSIBLE. Just little interesting things. Latin prefixes were often really hard to say. So what is the most common sound in English?
So Kara, it's very interesting in the chat, and I know you can't see it, but the last one, sun one, hands down, tons of people. This one, a couple of people started off with SWI, and then no one said anything for a long time. And then people are saying, well, I didn't really know it, but other people seem to know it. So that's what I'm going to say.
I love it. You guys are awesome. That's awesome. So if you knew schwa, you would be correct. So schwa is that backward upside down E, and it's that vowel sound. The reason why is because in a 2 or more syllable word, schwa can take the place of any vowel sound, although there are some common places for it. So schwa is like, we don't say wagon. I'm going to load up my wagon and go get dirt from the backyard. We don't say that. We say wagon. So the second syllable, that second vowel, schwas, because schwa says, and I always do the hand signals with it, or I. Okay. It also has to do with a stress syllable, which I told you stress syllables stress me out. So I'm not going there right now, but definitely I have had to do some studying on that for some questions that I've had to field from kids. I'm like, really? You're smarter than me. Yeah, I don't know. I have to go research it. I have to. I don't know it. So schwa, if you did that, good for you. You got it correct. So let's talk about inquiry process. This is actually right from this is Peter Bauer's idea of what should the questions and things that should go when we're studying words. He talks about when we study words, we ask, what does it mean? How is it built? What are some related words, like morphological relatives, words that share a base, or etymological? Oh man, that's gonna be hard for me to get out. Relatives, words that share a history. And then what's important to notice about the pronunciation, because what we know is that pronunciation often changes within words based on these things. So that was Peter Bauer's broad, oh, this is the routine you follow. I don't know about you, but how does that look like in a classroom? I needed more. So when I started working with teachers, we worked on an actual classroom routine for word investigation. Now, of course, you can take a picture of this, my friends, but you're going to have it on your resource page later on. So don't panic, and certainly don't try to copy down every word right now. Not your best use of time. Just listen, absorb the information, and you can have the resource page later. So first off, if I'm going to start a word investigation, we're going to brainstorm some questions. So you're going to have students share and add questions to their notebooks and to the class anchor chart, and students are free to launch their own word investigations once they know the resources and know the routine. But we'll always have a class investigation going on. That's kind of where we're at. So then what happens is students, after they brainstorm some word questions that they have, they're going to just start to collect words. We're going to find words that they think fit a pattern and don't fit a pattern. So we often call those examples or non-examples. So moving back to use those inquiry questions when they're doing that, just embed those questions into everything that you do. So if a kiddo brings you up a word, you're going to say, oh, what are its parts? And you're going to have, they're going to have to do a word sum on that. Pull that word apart and pick out all the parts that go with it. Okay. So you're going to ask them to do that. So you go back to those inquiry questions, but you put them in, embed them into this routine. So maybe as a class, you might write a hypothesis about words. And then you're going to test those hypotheses with those words that kids are collecting. You're going to see what works and what doesn't work. And you're going to continue, number 5, to test the hypothesis by writing word sums and eventually maybe even creating some word matrices or a word matrix. Number 6 is a flow. It says design a flow chart to explain the answer to the word question. I'm going to be honest with you. We've never gotten as far as to design a flow chart. It's something that I'm hoping to do with the class, the 5th grade class that I'm working with now. We aren't going to cover much of that tonight, but I do have some resources linked for you if you're interested in what that could look like. So let's kind of pull this apart even further here. There are different types of investigations. We also thought, we want a teacher-led investigation going on, but I know students are going to want to take off and investigate things on their own too. So we totally gave kids permission to do that. We have a teacher one, and I like the teacher one helped me embrace my love of a strong scope and sequence, because we think about things that we want kids to investigate are based on common affixes or roots that they're going to be coming upon in their textbooks or in the books that they're reading or within your ELA curriculum. There's lists and lists and lists of common prefixes and suffixes and Greeks and Latin roots that our kids need to know, okay? They need to know them because, they need to know them for life in general, right? But also if they're encountering a test like the Iowa assessment or last one, ISASS, I went back too many years, too far back there. Their hope of getting a word is that they can recognize one of its word parts in the vocabulary section and break it down to make a general guess of it if they didn't already know what that word meant, right? That's why morphology is so important, is because we really want them to be able to pull words apart and recognize parts of that word enough to give them a pretty good idea of what that vocabulary word means. That's where we want them going with it. That's why they have to get used to pulling words apart and putting them back together and looking at all the parts and knowing what it means. And, maybe it changed pronunciation because it moved from this country to this country and all those types of things. And were pretty successful if we gave kids graphic organizers and we gave them their own notebook where they kept words. So if we started and launched an investigation, which we'll do some examples shortly, kids would be bringing back 150 words that they had collected that they think fit the pattern, but they wanted to talk through. I mean, kids that you wouldn't even expect started noticing words around the room and talking to them about, talking with them, with their neighbors or with their teacher about what could this mean and does this fit and does this not fit? There's something, I don't know. I very rarely talk about something magical, but it would hook kids like I hadn't really seen before. And the magic of them just wanting to collect words and share with them and look at them and take them apart, it's really a beautiful thing. Student-led investigation often stemmed from the I wonders, which we're going to talk about that. Kids would brainstorm a list of things that they wondered about. For example, why does E appear so many times at the end of the word? There's got to be reasons for that. And in fact, there are, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. They can work on it at any time. They kind of tended to be longer investigations. We didn't really have a great platform worked out in the 5th grade classroom on how they can share. So they were just kind of constantly sharing. We're working on that too. That would be maybe an update for SWI 2. This video is from the Nevaeh school. And I think it might be a 2nd grade classroom. I'm not 100% sure. I guess we'll see here. I'm not going to share very much of this. For some reason the sound's out.
On April 20th, 2017, one of us wrote, I am curious about the word subtraction. The main thing I'm curious about is, and he actually wrote 2 things. What is the word sub? And what does the suffix, base, or prefix mean?
5 years ago, we came across the work of structured word inquiry. It really changed how we decided to deliver our literacy instruction. We had been using more of a phonics-based approach before because our culture is still teaching us that English spelling is based on sound. But what we found through structured word inquiry is the reason that we think a lot of spellings are crazy is because we're not looking at them through the lens of structure.
We have been learning about subtraction. The word subtraction grabbed my attention. Just looking at the word, just spell it out for me.
We have them announce the suffixes as units. When we begin to teach structures, they have all the pieces that they need to see what's really happening in the language.
You've seen SUB as a prefix. You've seen ION as a suffix.
What does subtraction have to do with understanding?
So I'm going to stop it here because it goes on. And of course, you can watch this on your own, but take a look at his poster right here. He's talking about what's the meaning, what's the structure, and what are the related words. And this is kind of the foundation of how kids could set up their notebooks. And this way is when they find things or whatever word that they are actually investigating, they can answer these questions and they can do it on their own using the tools that we're going to give them. You can tell it sounds like they must have a place in their classroom to post their questions. We had a large post-it, a couple of them actually, of just like I wonders, and we would work off those. And we never got to the place where we needed to refresh because they had so many I wonders. There's no way we got to them in about a 6-week time that I was able to be in the classroom with them. So there's just lots of different ways to handle it. Let's see here. Okay. All right, so inside the classroom, I'm going to share a couple examples of what we did. So I had the opportunity 1 year in Mount Pleasant to work with Chad Stutterstroms and the instructional coaches, and he was a high school biology teacher, is a high school biology teacher, and he really wanted to work on words. He wanted to pick out his heavy hitters, the ones that kids are going to see over and over and over again, and he wanted kids to investigate. So I got to go in, and this video that I'm not going to show you, but it's a TED Talk, and it talks about the war, and it has like hilarious, they're not supposed to be hilarious, they just are, reenactments of the Anglo-Saxons and how that all meshed. And it's about a 5-minute video, but we showed this to the kids and started talking to them about how our language changes as people migrate to different areas for many different reasons. And then we started talking about, we had some resources, and these are going to be linked on your resource page, but we had the steps, we had a graphic organizer that set kids out. And we started with words that they might know parts to, like, for example, we used osteomyelinitis. Well, osteomyelinitis, I know, right? I'm just really impressed that I can say it because I have all kinds of trouble pronouncing words usually, especially at 7:48 at night. Okay. And we had kids pull those apart. And once they realized that itis actually meant inflammation, they're like, oh my gosh, my grandma had so and so and so, and they were sharing out and really got invested in the work. You can see all of this with the lesson plans and things. It'll be linked on your resource page. So that's one opportunity that we use. This one, I always say you should take pictures, like, oh, I should take a picture of that. Yeah, this was my not so great picture, but then this is the only one I could find. We've done this one in, we did it, Jen and I did it in a 4th grade classroom several years ago. And this year I'm working through with a 5th grade classroom. Well, on their I wonders. And yeah, did we guide them in kind of the direction? We did. You know how that works. They kind of thought it was their idea when maybe it really wasn't, to investigate. Why do we have so many final E's? Well, according to Denise Ide, there are actually 9 ways that final E is used in words. And what the kids did, first we did a word attitude survey, which is linked for you. You can see it later. We developed I wonders, and yes, we pushed them towards, we made sure that the final E one was on the board. We all know how that works. We talked about word origins with etymology, and then we finally settled on the final E as our first word investigation to launch. The kids went out and they started collecting final E words like you would not believe. Like I said, I had kids coming back with 100, I would be there twice a week or something, and it's like 150 words collected with final E's on it. It was amazing. So then finally what we did is we started to categorize them, right? And you can see that up here, they noticed that there's like vowels just seem to be helping, like kind of like vowel consonant E. Then we noticed that a lot of words followed a V, okay, like in have and give. But now we didn't know why yet because we hadn't investigated. We're just noticing how these patterns are falling out. And I will tell you, in the end, these are only 5 things that they noticed. They got or noticed 7 out of the 9 ways that Denise Ide says that why words end in final E. And that was with not really any coaching. We just talked through it. They collected their words. We talked about them. We put them into a category and we just kept making new categories. And like I said, they ended up with 7 different ways out of the 9. Some of them were just a little bit too abstract for them. I liked this final, if it ends with a V, like have, HAVE, we teach that one as a sight word or a word that has to be memorized, when in fact, the only reason it has an E at the end, it's totally phonetic, HAV, have, is because the printing press, the V fell over and they needed something, a letter to hold up the V on the printing press. So they just stuck an E there. We're going to talk more about that later on, but going through and reading that and using tools that I'm going to share with you to discover that, kids were just fascinated by that. Talk about never forgetting how to say or spell have again, because they understand its etymology or its word history, right? Many of what we call sight words actually have a reason why they are the way they are, why they're spelled that way. And it's not because it's just weird and our English language doesn't make any sense. It does make sense. We just have to investigate it. All right, so here's a little bit more about that. So like I said, Denise Ide talks about 9 ways of twos for silent final E. The first one is, I gotta move this, sorry. So it's a vowel, about 50% of the time, it's a long vowel sound. That's that vowel consonant E, the one that you would expect, right? That was an easy one. The kids picked up on that right away. But this one, type 2, with the V and the U, well, it was easy for, first of all, no English word ends with J. So if you hear J at the end, it's usually spelled with DGE. But anyway, that's still an E, right? That trigraph DGE says J. No U and V. This was interesting too. When you hear or at the end of a word, you're supposed to add a silent E. So that takes care of like give and have. And then we have valve and blue and argue. So the only reason that E is here in blue is because it ends with a U sound, right? The only way the E is after this U in argue is because it ends with a U sound. Things like that. Again, words that we tell kids you just have to memorize because it's weird and it doesn't make sense. And in fact,
Hey,
it does.
Kara, there's a
Yes.
question about the word you in the chat. You want to talk about that? The word YOU?
Do you want to talk about it, Bambi?
I sure can.
Do it,
It's,
because I know you have an answer for it.
well, it's usually just because it is one of those words that is that high frequency that you see often. And so it just breaks the rule. That is a rule breaker for the YOU. There's like two, I can't remember, there's another word. There's two of them that end in that. I can't think of the other word right off the top of my head right now.
Well, I can guarantee you, Denise Ide probably talks about it in her book. So she would be one that would be a place for you to look for that. Remember, you don't have to have all this just stored in your head. You have resources that you're going to be able to look at to figure that out too. Holy buckets, it's 7:53. Okay, we have to just know if there's something that's resonating with you, I'd be writing it down and we're going to keep on rolling. Okay, word searcher. Word searcher is a tool and it's an online tool. It's free. The website's here. I'm not going to click to it right now. It looks like this. And what it does is if you wanted to investigate STRUCT, which is a base, then you put that in and it'll spit out as many words as they can find with that in it, which helps kids collect words. So if they are stuck and can't find any other words, they can use the word searcher tool. Just a little hint on that. If you have a word that ends in a finally, drop that finally, like in please, and just put in PLEAS, and you'll find more words that way. There's just some little kooky things like that you'll discover as you go. But this will be linked, so don't worry, on the resource page. Okay, Edmond Online. This is awesome, but kind of hard to read. First off, you have to teach kids to use these tools. You can't just give them the website and turn them loose because they won't know what to do. This is pretty meaty here. I love this. This comes from Can Do Kids Academy. It's just a fun way to look at it. They have the coolest posters for free. Did I say that? For free. I think I've said that maybe a couple times. All right. So if you want to look up the word comfort, what you're going to notice first off, this is you would type that into Edmond Online, and you notice it comes from the late 13th century, and it was actually comfortin first. So it was CON when they first started using it. And here, of course, is the definition. There's some more of how it travels through time, and you might where it says C fort or it says C COM, you want to send kids down those rabbit trails. That's kind of the part of it, but know that, tell them, bring them back and say, you got to come back to this homepage to really notice. And they start talking about the change of the N and M began in English in 14th century. And they talk about that, and they'll talk more about stories about words, like eventually how it became comfort foods and things like that. You'll notice that not in comfort, but sometimes on Edmond Online, they have this pi roots. And here's the deal with those. It's Proto-Indo, I gotta close this, European words. And basically they're kind of hypothesis of word origins, because it has that particular word has been changed around so many times. They're not 100% sure where the word origin is from. So they say PIE, and it's just because it's not written down anywhere. So they're making a guess or a hypothesis about the possible origin of the root. Okay, so you'll notice that. And that's something you're going to want to point out to kids when they use this resource. Word sums. I heart word sums. They're awesome. Okay. Even if this is the one thing you take from tonight on having kids do this, it's very worth your time. Analytical means to take it from whole apart. So you're going to pull it apart. So we would have ACT, remember, plus S, or actually it's ACT and then S rewritten as ACT plus S. All right, that's one way. So they're pulling it apart to see all its parts in there. And remember, we spell it instead of say it because the pronunciation may change. And then the synthetic side of things is you could give them the parts and have them rewrite the whole. And you're thinking, well, that would be really easy for them. Okay, great. Give them some success at something. This is one way that you could build spelling lists off of things too. So that's a really good idea. So word sums are awesome to do. And Can Do Academy has lots more ideas for word sums. It's simple. I just have a spreadsheet, or I have a Google Doc that I use, and I just plug in the different things that I need to have kids as they investigate words, pull them apart and put them back together. Important brain processes there too. And then there's the matrix. Kids love making the matrix. Okay, this is what the matrix could look like if you use the mini matrix maker. And then this would be one that you could do on your own too. They absolutely love it. So you read a matrix from left to right. So deconstruct ed. deconstructed. So we know that at the base of that is to build, right? And so they're trying to collect all those words and put them in here to notice their parts and then to organize it in a matrix. And they can get all this from the word searcher. They can get these and get these different words and then pull them apart in a word sum, and then they can plug them back in together for the word matrix. Students can always continue to add to this. Like it doesn't have to be just a one and done. As they discover more words, they can keep adding to their matrices. And it's not, you don't have to make one of these, but they love doing it because it shows off their work. So just a little hint, and you're going to have this link. It's free to have kids go in, but of course, always teach them how to use the tool before you expect to just use it independently.
Hey, Kara.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, where has the mini matrix maker been my whole life, and why didn't you tell me about it?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right, and I'll forgive you. And number two, someone asked, is there a place where the matrices are already made for you? Off the top of your head, do you know that or not? Really?
Can Do Academy has a ton of them.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All they have to do is, and the resources are free. So all they have to do is screenshot them or download them, or they have probably that I saw just on either off of Facebook or on their actual website, probably 100, 150 of them. So yeah, there would definitely be places. Other places would be in these books that will be linked to. Okay, so we already kind of talked about Mindshift. I hope you've moved a little bit, particularly on the English language is actually very organized and logical, but we aren't going to take time to go back over it. So where do I start? So outside the classroom, start reading. I'm recommending several books here, and try not to do this work by yourself. Find the teacher across the hall or your grade level partner, or maybe, if you're 1-2 or 5-6 teacher or whatever, get together and start sharing your resources and having conversations about them. It's funny, I was teaching the Writing Revolution at Waco, and their title teacher, his name's Chad. We were talking about this, and we actually talked about SWI, and he's like, hey, oh my gosh, I have to share you with this book. There's this children's book. Well, I say children's book, but it's written for adults and such too. And it's called The Inconvenient Alphabet. And it's how Noah Webster and Ben Franklin started the spelling revolution. It's so cool. So he's like, I was looking at it and I was taking pictures. I was like, no, I'll just keep it. I got 3 or 4 copies of it. So thanks to Chad, because that was that could be something you share with kids too, to get their minds rolling on words in general. Another one is that I ordered just off Amazon, because it was actually from Can Do Academy, and it's Every Word Tells a Story. So you could just use this as something to share with your class, like, where did giraffe come from? Where do all these words come from? And it's their etymological or their word origin. And it's so cool. And it's so interesting. Inside the classroom, of course, brainstorm a list of I wonders with your students, and know that you can kind of steer them in the direction that you think you might want to go. And just begin introducing morphology and etymology, like that our words tell a story, they're made up of parts, and those kind of ideas, getting them used to that. And just make sure to explain you don't have all the answers. That's why you investigate. So one way that in that 4th grade classroom initially, we started with this activity where I gave them these 6 words and asked them to take a look at it and what do they all have in common? Well, if you can tell, they all have in common MOT. MOT actually means to move. And we were able to kind of investigate, well, how would these all be words that have something in common? And it was just something we did in just one class period. Actually, it was probably like a 20-25 minute activity, but it got them thinking about words. It was a place to start, right? All right, so this is the SWI resources and the resource page, which I think Jen's going to drop in the chat, and then this is going to come to you via email too, if you don't happen to get it out of the chat. And these are the books that I've been talking about. The only one that I haven't used or read is this Oxford Dictionary of Word Origins. This was just recommended to me. I can't remember who recommended it to me, but it might be something that's new, and it would be something that they could also, instead of using Edmentum Online, they could use this word origin dictionary too. It might be a little more user-friendly because it's designed for kids. So, and then these other resources we have talked about. And a final, did you know? By investigating why certain words are spelled differently than what is expected, we gain a deeper understanding of our spelling system. And this is when the magic happens. Now, I don't use the word magic very often because there is no magic fix to my world with my dyslexia friends. But it is really neat to see kids get interested in words. So why is does and goes spelled the way they are? Okay, so really we have a base do, and then we're adding essentially an es. When a noun or other words end in an o, we add es, right? Like in echoes and tomatoes and potatoes, and it's also pronounced with a z. So what they're doing here is they're taking these two words, adding that es, and it now says go, goes. Did you hear it? It's really following this rule of when a word ends in an o, we add es and it says z. It's really actually following words. We could do a whole nother big investigation about lots of other things that go with it, but that's just in a nutshell, does and goes. All right, so I really don't know that we have time for Q&A, but this is us, Southeast Iowa Dyslexia Teacher and Pre-Service Group. Here are our emails. This last one is Amy's email, which I know many of you know. I just wanted to give a final credit to all the graphics that I borrowed from Can Do Academy. There's a ton of them in there. And look for that resource page and look for some things, particularly for you. You're going to get an email in the next couple of days about these things too. So, and email us or talk to us. Maybe I froze. I don't know. It says my internet's unstable. So I don't know how much of that you caught, but anybody else from the group, do you have something to add? And I'm going to stop share. Holy moly, 99 plus new messages because I couldn't monitor my chat.
This was amazing, Kara. Thank you so much for all this information. It was just packed full of, and can't wait to try things out and then ask you more questions about how to do it better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kara, I think just, can you encourage some of the younger teachers or those who are just studying to be teachers? Like, how long did it take you to build this knowledge base? Because it's a little overwhelming when you maybe have barely even heard the word morphology, let alone the other two words.
So when we first got started, we got started in what, Jen, was that 2019 when we first worked in 4th grade? And I'll tell you, the charge was a principal said, hey, we got to do something about word study. Word study is not working. These kids are not engaged. And that's where me searching for something, and of course I was their literacy consultant and searching for something to help with that. And from there, we just we learned a little bit, and there's so much, you're right. We have just scratched the surface here. So I'm in it like 5 years right now. And you just keep learning and asking questions and looking for resources and, going and on Facebook and following different groups like the Science of Reading, and then they have these great free webinars and things that you can just tune into, and you build your toolkit. It certainly does not happen overnight. Lots of questions, lots of resources, and you just sit and absorb.
And I think
Jen,
maybe
anything to
word
add on that?
sums would be easy to start with. Do you like that might be a baby step to take?
Absolutely easy to do. Go on Can Do Academy and pull some of them off, then take them and take out the answers and have kids work through them. You have the answers right there. And you can feel confident in that, because I know it's really hard to get in front of kids and not know the answers. That was really hard for me to get over too. And I'm just like, you know what? I don't know, but we'll investigate it. So just get used to using that phrase in your vocabulary.
I love that you showed that this can be done with littles too. And that they already have a lot of that vocabulary in their language, and just to be able to pull all of that out. And I thought, would it be too easy? Like if I wanted to start out to just do the word play with all my groups, K4, and just start out easy, and then I'm learning, and then I can kind of differentiate for groups after that.
Absolutely. And really do those hand things. I love her in the rain video, how she does base, prefix, and I'm probably backwards, aren't I? But prefix and suffix, and just doing that little thing, they pick up on that really fast, and knowing that, oh, a prefix is before a base. Just those little things make it a little more multi-sensory. Yeah, definitely. And if you want to know more about play, I'm pretty sure play is in beneath the surface of words too, like a whole study on that. So that could be something. Use those resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Well, does anybody have any other quick questions before we wrap it up? It looks
Somebody in the chat asked about ELL students. They asked about special ed and all three of us jumped on and said yes. Someone asked about ELL and I'm just thinking like cognates and so on, that like, is there a section on Can Do about cognates only that would work with ELL, or does someone who has a better background in EL than me want to speak to that?
Well, I think certainly giving them and connecting meaning to our elements and things like that would be super important, which is really what you want to do. I do a lot of work with Michelle Dickey right now on dyslexia with our EL population, and that, you know, always connecting it to meaning is a really important thing with, and that's exactly what this is all about. And then having them better understand the structure of our language, that's a good thing too, right? English is a very deep orthography, which means it's really kind of hard to learn, versus something like Spanish that's really shallow and much easier to learn. But letting them in on those secrets, which I don't know why they're secrets, could be a good thing. Well, would have to be a good thing. Anybody else on ELs?
I see Logan Goebel said that it really helps them when they break apart the word, like doing this really helps students who are ELL.
That makes sense that it would, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Kara and team. We really appreciate collaborating with you guys this month, and we will take you up on that SWI part 2 if you're interested.
Give me a while, but yes, I need to be in the classroom more before I do that too. But
Right.
yes, definitely coming soon. I don't
We'll
know.
chat about it, and maybe we can dig in a little bit deeper. But I know that we all have something we can take back and try tomorrow if we'd like to. So again, thank you so much for coming, everyone, and with your busy schedules and everything, fitting that in. I will also get the recording out and Kara's PDF of her slide deck with all the resource links and everything for you. And also I will reach out to the person who won the giveaway book tonight. Please reach out anytime to all of us if you have questions along the way, and we'll see you in March. So good night.
Hey, Kara, I have a fast question.
Yes, ma'am.
Someone asked, said she really liked the 6 words and when they broke them apart, and wanted to know what resource that was.
6 words.
Yeah.
Was it the MOT one? MOT.
And I just shared whatever you're wanting, you know, if you have an example of something that you want kids to investigate, just provide that for them and they'll do the searching. You know, or if you want to, there's something specific and you want to provide something, if it's, if you're working on PED or whatever it is, you can just look for words and put those together. But when I was doing it with students, I provided what it was that we were looking for, and they loved coming to school and putting a word that they found up on the chart, because then we could investigate it and talk about whether or not, well, what does this whole word mean? So then what could this word part mean? And it was a great way to do that.
Kara, are there other, or anybody that has done this? So is this the main activity? Are there other things that spark independent work or rotation work? I get a lot of questions about what productive activities can I have kids do? And, you know, when I'm working with small groups and stuff, so would you have them search for words in their books, or any other activities around that? Or it's just kind of.
Well, definitely like word sums would be a place to really get them to look at words as they look at parts and things like that. So they can remember that's that analytic and that synthetic piece where they can pull the word apart, make a word sum, and then they can put the word back together. They can follow a word sum and put the word back together. So that's something that they could do pretty independently. I'm trying to think what else, like any of the research stuff, like any of them, like the word collecting in itself, if they're, once you show them how to use word searcher, because that's a huge piece to that, you have to show them how to use the tools and not just release them, because, you know, tools can be used for evil, right? We all know this, and they can get in trouble with it very quickly. You could give it to dictionary.com, you could give them like a root or something, and they could be looking up origins. You can have a whole paper of different kinds of like roots that, and then maybe do like I did and give them 6 and have them figure out what do they all have in common. And that could be their work that they're working on independently when they're teachers meeting in small groups too. The key to it is just make sure they know how to use the resources. Otherwise, they're going to be at your table because they're stuck, or you know what I mean? You have to have practice those tools with them before turning them loose. You could even have take different word parts or elements, like with, let's say, like commotion or something, and or I'll start with something easier like structure. You could take STRUCT and then put some prefixes and suffixes and things and have them make words from that. You could put that in a baggie and then have them work on that at their, and that's still, and then they could write those down, right? And they're on their paper as a piece of accountability. But I like the multi-sensory piece of them being able to move things around too. Even Post-its, you can put it on Post-its or
Yeah.
other ideas, ladies. I know you guys are all well versed in this too.
I'm just thinking about the opportunities in tier 1 for all kids to have access to this and to have opportunities to work through that. And I hate to think about kids missing out on that rich conversation if too much of the work is done in small group. And so thinking about making sure that it is just a part of tier 1 for all kids, and that we can provide scaffolds to help them. And we want entry points for kids.
Good point.
Kids,
Would you
yeah,
do?
I don't know. I just think about how we can really and beef up that tier 1.
I love that. Yeah, for sure.
Do you do like 1 or 2 per week, or like as many as you want, really, or just?
Well, I think so. That's the uncomfortableness of not having a set scope and sequence, which, you know, we love, right? We love our scope and sequences and we cling to them, right? So as a teacher-led investigation, I'm going to want to cover those most commonly used prefixes, suffixes, and roots, right? I'm going to work off of that list. And I mean, I know you have tons of those lists, but I'm going to, I've never really thought about it on a weekly basis, but as often as I can. So let's say kids, I introduce 6 words and the kids have to discover the secret root or base, whatever you wanted to say with that, or whatever you're working on. And on that's day 1, they discover that. Then day 2, they're collecting words and trying to figure out, making a hypothesis as to what it means. And then, you know, day 3, you perhaps uncover that for them, and then organize their words in some way. And then maybe the next day you start a new one. I don't know, that might work. You could try it that way as a goal in your mind, but it's going to depend on how fast the kids are moving too. It's going to, like everything else. So I mean, I think I could see it as like a 3-day rotation as you introduce a root, but they're going to, you don't want to change things up for them too, and not always do that same routine, even though I love routines. That's that hard part of wrapping your brain around an inquiry part. Like you want them to make discoveries, but yet you have to like lead them to the really important stuff that you're trying to follow in a scope and sequence. Because I'm sure you have administration too. That's like, you know, we need to know exactly what is being taught here.
Right.
So,
and in some of our newer curricular programs, morphology is built into some of the upper grades. And so knowing what you have coming up and taking kids through an investigation can be a great way to front load what will be coming up in curricular content, depending on what is available within your program, or it can be alongside what you're learning as well.
So I'm just thinking about like, and I know no one is left on that's a really young new teacher, but I'm just thinking about just really beginning teachers. And I know this it's inquiry, so I know I'm taking it away from inquiry. But I'm just thinking that I would structure it where it's like, I do it with the whole class and model it like one each day as part of our opening routine. And I model it and we talk about it. And then I think I would then grow it into where maybe small groups would be working on a couple of really set parts of it. And then I would launch more into inquiry. And I know that's not the main purpose. I've taken away the inquiry idea, but I think if I were a new teacher, I would have to have a little bit more structure to it in the beginning. That's just kind of what I'm thinking.
I think that was our idea with doing teacher-led investigations and student-led investigations. Knowing that students were, once they knew a routine and they knew how to use the tools, they could always investigate things on their own. And you'll have kids that will want to do that and are going to be able to do that, right? Because they are just your kiddos that can. Coming alongside of that and following more of a scope and sequence. And yes, it takes the inquiry process out of that, but we really have some things with morphology that we really need kids to understand. And that's really what we get our most bang for our buck with the teacher led, because you can control the pacing and you can control the roots and the word parts that you're working on. So I think that was kind of our idea of having the twofold. And yeah, I think you're going to have to do a lot of modeling anyway, just for them to understand how to use the tools, right? And like, why do I use this tool? And why do I use this tool? Why do I use word searcher? Oh, that's because I'm trying to find examples that fit what were our hypothesis and don't fit our hypothesis. And getting to them to that point is going to be a lot of modeling, a lot of modeling.
And to that, Kara, I want to add that Can Do Academy is the best place to start because they give you a book to buy. They have all the parts and pieces. Like as a new teacher, that's where I would direct them to because it's got such great scaffolds for you to just start rolling. We have a teacher in our district who started it with, I can't remember which one she started with, but she bought the book and the kids love it. So.
What grade?
I
ma'am?
don't have that book.
That was 4th grade. I can't remember what the book was. I think it was Dot. Is Dot the first one?
She
I feel like
does.
Dot's the first one.
They
I think that's
recommend
what
so
she did.
many books. So this book came from Can Do. This is why I bought it. The Every Word Tells a Story. So like as teaching them like what etymology is, this is where I would start with etymology and getting them to understand how words have stories. They're built upon different meanings and things because and they're done in short little snippets. You could pick like robot for the day and you could be like, oh, this is where it came from and this is the story behind it. And you talk about, it's actually a word from Czechoslovakia, which is interesting to me. I didn't know that. I just opened up to a random page, but I would definitely like start with, I like Bambi's idea too, of starting with some sort of book and just getting them to use the idea of etymology and morphology and why it matters. Why does it matter in our language? We do it now as, we save it for the older kids, thinking that, morphology is too hard for our littles to understand, when really that's not the case if we're starting young and giving them reasons why we study words. So that's another idea for a starting point too, is, just pull one of those books. And this one, like I said, it came off Can Do Academy, that idea for it. And they don't necessarily have lesson plans to go with it, but they have the word sums or the matrix or something like that, or a resource or a definition of bases. I mean, it's all there.
Not to pull us off target, but when we were talking about our younger kids and morphology, have you guys seen sortagories and their morph sort?
Is that spinny thing?
That was the boxes.
Yeah, boxes and dogs. The example on the free one is dogs, and you have dog and then S, and a dog has one picture of a dog, and then they add the S and it's multiple dogs. I think it's by Readsters, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ooh, I like Readsters.
It's called sortagories and the morph sort.
Well, I don't know if Readsters is actually, it's Nancy Eberhart.
Oh, it's not Readsters?
No, they just
sorry.
did that webinar together.
Oh, is that what?
Oh,
It's Nancy and then another gal and they also wrote the Literacy How books for syntax and things like that. So I think
Okay.
it's their company, but they partnered up with Readsters on that webinar, if that's where you saw it there.
I can't remember. I just did the Heart one webinar. Wasn't that Readsters? But I don't think I did the Sortagories one.
Nancy, it's Eberhart.
Hmm.
Nancy Eberhart, yeah.
hey
I
guys,
think
what did,
parent
go ahead.
company. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was reading the chat. What did Joel share? I can't, like, what
Are
did
we
he?
still recording? Should we shut the recording off?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I think Joel is still on. He is, like I said in the chat, he's one of our, word nerds
Experts,
unite.
no kidding.